Get ready. You're listening to Pirated Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Pirated Radio. I believe this is episode 4. Maybe? Yeah, I think it's 4. In this episode, I speak to a gentleman called Mark Davis, who is a type designer. And we essentially nerd out about type for an hour and a half. This is very long. And if you are someone that's listening to this that doesn't necessarily know about design and just knows me, there will be moments of this where you're probably thinking, I have no idea what these people are talking about. Just as a pre-warning. But yeah, we talk about his work, how he got into design, the future of typography. We talk about his now kind of infamous, I don't know if that's the word, infamous typeface, Tinyhand, which he designed from Donald Trump's handwriting, which was featured on The Tonight Show and things like that. But yeah, this is very long. It is good. It's probably my favourite one thus far. No offence to anyone that I've spoken to before. But yeah, enjoy. Firstly, for the people that don't have the pleasure of knowing yourself, can you give people that may be listening a bit of an introduction to yourself and maybe what you do?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Mark Davis. I am I think of myself as a combination of a few things, but I think I'm probably the most skilled at in what I've been or known for just like an insane amount of passion for like my current interest in typeface design. And that's kind of propelled me through a lot of different kind of variations of my current career. I work on typefaces, I work on logo types, but you know, I'm also an art director and graphic designer for my day-to-day kind of projects.
I guess off the back of that, has type always been something that you've always had a bit of an interest in, I guess?
Well, there's a couple very particular, I think, kind of funny scenarios that happened when I was a lot younger that my mom kind of told me about later on. Like, I think she took when we were like trying to buy used cars. My parents were trying to buy a used car and I was like 3 or something like that. And I had one of those magnetic boards or something. Like I was in the backseat and I was like drawing the outline of what car, like the word car, but like not like I wasn't drawing just like CAR. I didn't know what those were, but I was drawing the outline, the outside of all those letters just because I saw them as kind of interesting. But so that was like, I'm not probably wasn't 3 or something, but like pretty young. But I guess like my real kind of passion for it was in high school, my beginning of it, because I was like, oh, there are so many opportunities to like work on T-shirts and like, you know, everyone knows what they want on a T-shirt. So like, and I wasn't much of an illustrator back then or anything. So I was kind of like, well, what's the font gotta be? And, you know, that was like my love affair with dafont.com, our true love, dafont.com. So just trying to find the right dafont. It's not just a font, it's dafont. So, you know, working on posters back then, working on like hoodies and track jackets and just really enjoying like seeing, you know, something typographic in other people. And then it was my senior year in, let me see here. It was my senior year in high school and I watched the Helvetica documentary. And everything changed because suddenly I realized that I wasn't really living in a world. I was just living in Helvetica's world and I was just a participant inside of it. So I have a few Helvetica posters in my room and like, you know, a couple calendars that are like Helvetica inspired or just straight up Helvetica. So that kind of passion was cool to me just because like one person's design could really permeate almost everything just because he had met a cultural movement of like Swiss design or like modernism. And so now it's kind of, it's lost a lot of flavor to many people, but, you know, I still think it's a very seducing idea that like, something that you make typographic can have a life much bigger than any design it was part of.
Off of the kind of back of that, and I wanted, you've worked in type for a little bit now. Do you have any advice for people that are maybe in college and things like that? And this is me included in this, that are maybe thinking once they've graduated, they might want to go into type as like their main career field, like their main career. Do you have any sort of advice that you'd give to somebody right now in sort of the modern age about in terms of that?
Yeah, well, I think a really awesome thing about type design now is that you don't need to be taught for 5 years how to carve metal. And you don't have to go through a truly grueling internship of, all this lead, all this. I mean, the barrier to entry, of course, I'm mostly joking. People haven't been doing that for, I guess, like 80 years or something. But honestly, the barrier of entry to get into type is super low now, which is amazing. And so nowadays, like, I always kind of recommend that people give the Glyphs application. So that's like the Glyphs app, which is Mac only. I'm sorry for Windows users, but Glyphs, it's really, really well thought through. I mean, there are some other font design programs. Like in my personal experience, like the other ones, I've tried a few of them, but the other ones have been a little bit too technical for even me to like really sink my teeth into. Like I remember like a college summer where I was just my mom invited me and my sister to come to Paris with her, and I decided I would stay in my room. And I would work on my one font that I was just cracking in my room instead. So, I mean, maybe I shouldn't have done that choice, but maybe I should have. I mean, I went to Paris later on after I was like a graphic designer, and I like moved to New York and had a few opportunities to go to Paris. So it wasn't a big miss, but so it's pretty addictive because like you have a ton of control. Like there's a possibility that you like really just sink your teeth really into like one letter a really long time. You're not even sure how much of a difference it's making. And then you like start to modifying all these other letters. Like it's very fun. And it's yeah, like I said it already, it's very addictive. So Glyphs for sure. There's also like online forums. I think type drawers, I like to emphasize the W there, but type drawers is a place that I would kind of go if I was posting or wanting feedback on my first typeface, because my first typeface, there's a website that's now dead because it's, been 10 years or something like that, but something called Typophile that the older type designers probably know all about. But, I posted my first design to that and people are like, oh, well, I mean, looks kind of fun, but, what if all these, it basically this tried and true process of someone very excited about their first typeface and slowly making it far more and more and more consistent with all the other letters and maybe less interesting to them from the first draft, but more consistent and masterful slowly over time. So finding a mentor, whether that's many people who are willing to donate time on a forum or like finding a mentorship program or finding just a mentor who's like able to meet with you weekly and just take a look at your specimens and stuff like that. That's kind of the path to learning. There's a lot of things to do after that, like after you've been doing that for around maybe 2 years or 3 of just like making your own things, like finalizing them as far as you can, perhaps pursuing like Type at Cooper for like a summer program. I did that. It was just 1 month. It was 10 hours a day and you had Sunday off, but like super fun for me. There's also Type at Cooper. That's the extended program that's like a 3 semester after work kind of thing. It's like once a week, I believe. And so that's in the East Coast and the West Coast, Type at Cooper. But I mean, COVID, so whatever. It's probably everywhere now. And then there's also master's programs that you can go to. The one I know about is the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague, KABK. I can't pronounce it, but it's most people kind of take it as like kind of this holy grail of a 1-year master's in type design. And invariably the people who are still passionate after taking it, because some people take that program and they just learn a lot about their graphic design career. They don't really want to continue doing type design, but your work can only become stronger after learning so much about type, in my opinion. So, right. But the people who are still very interested after a grueling year in the Netherlands, designing typefaces, multiple projects, I wouldn't say like I have this like fantasy of like what it is like to be at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague, because I applied to that program. I didn't necessarily get in at the time, probably for good reason. I was pretty new at type then, but I'm not sure if you've seen the film Whiplash, but I was definitely thinking of like this, mean Professor Fletcher, and he's just like, but it's like a type context. So he's just kind of like, is the spacing loose or tight? And then he's like smacking your hand or something like that. That's what I think KBK is like, but it's probably nothing like that at all. But so there are lots and lots of ways to kind of engage yourself into the type community and lots of different learning resources, but also like experiment on your own, which I think you got to do for yourself to figure out if it's something you really are interested in. So, you can't find out until you try it. Just
to touch on as well, because you mentioned a lot of American ones and things like that, just to touch on, if you are listening from sort of a European side, because if you can't tell, I'm British, there is only one MA that I know of in England in type design, and that's in Reading.
No, I've heard excellent things about the Reading program as well. I haven't looked into it as closely.
Yeah, I know for a fact that they do this thing where they get you to design scripts that aren't in your native tongue. So like they'll get you to do like Asian scripts, even though you speak English and things like that you're not native in, which I thought is a pretty cool idea, isn't it? Because I guess there's things like that where you wouldn't necessarily think about sort of the weight when you're thinking about a Roman letter forms, there'd be different things on sort of a Chinese letter form where the weights sit and things like that. It's not something that I've looked into, but I just assume it's like that.
Right. There's a ton of fundamentals of how to draw like a Latin letter that can be applied to it, but there's
not Roman and Latin. I've got that wrong.
No, it's funny because like I was in a fight with my coworker about like, oh, we've really got to correct this CEO's memo about this logo type, because he says like these letters must remain Roman because we're doing a translation. I'm like, they're not Roman, they're Latin, but I know that you're thinking like Roman and italic or something. Like that's a good antonym there, but like, no, I wasn't calling you out. I'm sorry, but it's just like I have all these like really small pet peeves that are like, it's like if I could just help some people with these small things. But there's tons of like optical compensations that are like difficult to talk about in a podcast, for example. But like the minute that you can see like variation you have to do to combine two shapes in a convincing way, because I think we all learn from graphic design, the easier something looks, the harder it actually is. So if you apply that to, a 600 character system, be it a Latin 600 character typeface or a Korean, Japanese, Chinese typeface that is over 5,000 characters, the impact of a properly applied optical compensation is critical. So, but it's also super wonderful to learn from people who do know their language incredibly well and can, from a personal perspective, give you their opinion of how they've seen it and those sensations that they receive from seeing certain types of letter forms. Because there's not just one way you can do a lowercase a. There's like maybe 5 or something in just Latin, for example, and that's a non-exhaustive number there, but there's probably way more just for other scripts and languages. So, and they probably understand those implications far better, which is, an even better reason to listen to and seek out the opinions of, people of different backgrounds of us.
One thing I did want to add on at the end, and I'll do it now because you kind of touched on sort of the pet peeve thing, and I didn't include this in the email that I sent over to you on purpose, but I'm in a Facebook group and it's called something like "This font is a crime" or something along those lines. But the thing is, it's called font in the title of the group, and I put a post up in it which said, "You're all living a lie. You're all sheep. It's typeface. It's not font." And it consists of a lot of people that aren't type design. They're not designers. They have a passing interest in type and things like that. So for some reason, a lot of people got angry at me for that. I don't know why. I was like, that's what it's called. But there's a guy that commented which said, I think he worked in code, I forgot his name, but he said basically, because I guess you can use the term font. Technically, if you go from the definition, you can use the term font for most things, because it irks me too, because I've got that thing of like, I've had a type lecture at university and things like that, and he says, don't use the term font, use typeface all the time. So if I was looking over your shoulder and you were making a poster, yeah, and I said to you, I don't like that font, change that font. Instantly, that's kind of, by definition, you'd think that means change the weight, isn't it? Because font refers to the weight, and then typeface will refer to the actual changing of the typeface. But the term font in itself refers to...
Well, I would actually have a different answer to that. But
let me finish first, and then you can correct me. But the term font, it refers to a weight, or if it's italic, things like that. So by that definition, whether it's Helvetica, light, or Comic Sans bold, I can say change that font. Is that an argument to be had there? Because they're both fonts, aren't they? So I can say change that font to that font, if you get what I mean.
No, I totally get where you're coming from. There's many ways I can talk about that, from all the levels of pedantry I could ever possibly want to engage. But something I've been thinking about lately is I will kind of like answer your question with like a story, and then like I'll go back to it. But like,
no, yeah, go for it.
There was, I'm not sure. I mean, whatever. I'm going to mention it, but like, there's an Instagram account, and like a small bane of my existence are design oriented Instagram accounts, because like on one hand, like if they make a visual kind of statement or post or something, all you can do is like reply text to it. And like, it's the hierarchy of like Instagram is photo, like, image, like, like a cityscape, like landscape, like the obvious thrust is just kind of like image. So there's like a bias towards whatever is visual there. So anyway, I just kind of have an issue with like design Instagram, because like it totally disregards discourse over just like the pretty thing that someone posted. But someone had posted something, and it was a very pedantic kind of like technical jargon thing. And it was, so there's like, I hope people who are listening know what a ligature is, but a ligature, because I'm going to have a very difficult time describing it without an image, but like a ligature is where like, you have two standard letters, like maybe, envision in your mind a serif like Times or something like that. So like, and for this example, there's S and T. He had shown an image of a ligature between the top right-hand corner, so let's say 1 o'clock of S, to the top of the T. So there's this curl that's like a very elegant curl from the top of the S to the top of the T. So they're both lowercase letters, by the way. So like, and he was like, by the way, this is not just a ligature. This is called a gadzook. And I was like, and this person, by the way, had 25,000 followers on Instagram. And I was like, sir, I think you are misinterpreting something, and this is slightly misinformation, because like, you can look up gadzook on Google, like type gadzook on Google Images, and you will see this thing, and it's kind of just like annotated. It's just usually in a dumpster full of like just terms of letter things you should know. And gadzook is just in there somewhere, pointing at this random ligature between a C and a T, or an S and a T. And it's like, I have found, and I've asked many people, there's no historical like reference for what this fucking means. And my current understanding is that someone misread an article that someone was, enamored by this discretionary ligature between this S and a T, and said a gadzook as an exclamation because he liked it. And then someone decided, like, I really need to make a poster about type. And so I think he's talking about this being a gadzook. I'm going to call this thing a gadzook. So it's this, misinformation megaphone thing of people saying this something that they've seen before and not having like an expert to talk to about like if that's a real thing or not. Whatever. They just kind of say the same things over and over. So eventually he was like, whatever, he kept digging his own hole in this like thing. And he was just like, oh, well, I took this from a Jonathan Hoffler piece when he was working on Jensen. And I was like, what are you talking about? Jonathan Hoffler, who, and for those playing at home, he is like the head honcho at Hoffler and Company, which is a well-known type foundry. And I'm like, to this person on Instagram, which is like a wonderful, place to have a stupid argument. But like Jonathan Hoffler did not work on Jensen. And, I just actually messaged Jonathan Hoffler on Twitter and said like, and he's just like, I in no way did I ever say that this ligature is called a gadzook. And I sent this guy the screenshot of Hoffler saying like, hey, when I was working on his own typeface, Hoffler text, and classifying ligatures, and he like had quaint ligatures and like like lots of distinct descriptions of different kinds of ligatures because that was important to the operating system or something like that, like all this like very technical things. And he's like, but every single part of this person's thing was wrong. And he took down the post and he made an apology, like a story saying like, this is not a gadzook, it's just a ligature. It is, and like he also called it a quaint, but he misread Hoffler's thing about a quaint classification of a ligature. So all these really weird things, but all of that was just simply talking about how people try to use very descriptive, flowery language that actually sometimes doesn't communicate to other people, because sometimes they're unsubstantiated. So that's one part of it, is just that sometimes people just use the entirely wrong words for a type because they want to sound smart. When actually, if you think of actual intelligent people, when they're in an expert role, they focus far more on their own understanding, not overreaching their vocabulary, not trying to find things to just embellish what they say. They try to find the things that really educate other people the most and convey their point. So before, I used to really enjoy like, oh, unless you're talking about the open type font, like the actual font file, you shouldn't say font, you should say typeface. And if you want to switch between Helvetica Bold and Helvetica Light, you're changing the font style. Like I could get pedantic in that. But nowadays, life is too short. If I understand that like someone is trying to tell me about this thing they like and they're trying to engage me on something we both love, why would I take a peck out of them? So I have flip-flopped in that, but also I'm 29. I've been out of school for a while and I realized like, hey, actually, I really don't care about talking to someone the difference between typeface and fonts because like, it's slightly more, I don't know, it's slightly less highbrow to talk about fonts, but everybody knows that they are and everyone appreciates it. And the more ways that we can find ways, I'm repeating myself a little, but the more we can find ways to include more people into interest about something, the better. But sure, some of these people who are talking about fonts and typeface, they don't even care that like, there's a historical thing about like, a metal font is, literally a case of 4,000 pieces of metal. And like that font was, the 8-point font. Like there was 4,000 pieces available of 8-point. And then there was the 12-point font because like they had a whole nother case for it. So like there are people who aren't even interested in that. And but they're noticing that letters have shapes that are decidable in design, which is really cool to me. But I hate to keep finding play the devil's advocate. I love playing devil's advocate, but sometimes it can. I don't want to be a gatekeeper, and I don't want to feel like my education makes someone else feel inferior to me. But I think that's a really valuable point because, like, we want to say the right thing. We want to there's craft involved in how we, are professionals. How can you tell the difference between like a craftsperson designer who's been an art director for 10 years or someone who's been, just starting to learn a typeface? There are some tells, and that comes from their interest in how they investigate themselves. But also there's like graphic designers who've been working for, 12, 30 years, or probably 30 years at this point, and they call them fonts because they want to, and they know it conveys best to the client what the hell they're talking about. So they're very content with using the wrong term. So there's lots of sides to that coin. But so long as we can make sure we include as many people as possible, also say the right things, and also actually convey something versus overreaching our understanding, which is the biggest problem, I think. Because this person who was just trying to make a cool post, he got it all wrong. And he is an expert, and he teaches people about type design all the time. Is he a fraud? No, he's not. He got a term wrong, and also English is his second language. So I don't fault him for any of that. But, you can find on Google how many other people think that gadzook is a typographic term, but actually it's just someone really liking how a letter looks. So
I have to say, gadzook is a lot cooler word than ligature. If somebody had a gun to my head and they were like, pick one to call it for the rest of eternity, I'd call it a gadzook. Just
so they call it a gadzook, but just you better know it's not real and you're making it up. You just better know.
Right. I think there's a fine line between when you walk, because I've done it when I've spoken to people and I've been like, oh, this is a such and such, and I've said things about like ligatures, and like ampersand's a good one. I can be like, that's called an ampersand or something like that. But I think there's a fine line between being a massive dick and being somebody who's there to just to be like, oh, I know things, and I think you can tread that nicely, can't you?
Yeah, no, sure. But then like, yeah, they're just happy they know something, and you're like, well, actually you don't. Actually, you do not. Go home. Like, yeah. And that's definitely a daily battle for me. Someone who believes he knows so much and so little empathy.
That's fair.
That's my problem.
I love your level of like nerdiness about it. I think I aspire to be you going forward.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's no problem.
I appreciate how you like saved that for our first date together to tell me that. No, just, I think we should normalize calling podcasting dates. It's just like, this
definitely.
is a date.
I'll call it.
I'll
name the episode something to do with dates. Now I'll come up with something like a font pun, which
dates
is to do
fonts.
with dates.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, exactly.
You'd have a really nice time talking to. Do you know the book Type Matters?
That name rings a bell.
It's like black and it's leather. The guy that wrote it and everything, he's my lecturer at university, and it's been all over the world, the book has and stuff like that. But he'd love to have a discussion with you. I don't know how many it's sold, but it's a fair bit.
The Type Matters by Jim Williams.
Oh yeah. That Jim Williams is my lecturer.
I'm just Googling, and I'm not a genius. I just no, it seems like a nicely done book. Yeah,
no, it's lovely. It's good for like people that are just getting into it, and it's got a load of different, It's like when you make the type at the start of it. See, I'm starting to fall apart now because you've started overwhelming me with type stuff. But the letter at the start, when you make that bigger and things like that, it's got a load of cool stuff like that, and but obviously things like kerning and leading and tracking and everything like that.
Right.
But he'd love to have a conversation with you. I'm sure he would love this.
No, well, that meeting more nerds it gets more and more fun over time, and especially because at a certain point, like it is just finding other people's understandings, and I think I can definitely learn from anybody. So and I don't just say that as if like I'm some expert who could teach a college course. I mean, I could probably only teach a college course on typography. That's probably all I could do right now. But I don't know, the experience that goes into teaching so many different students and filling them with a passion is a skill in all of its own. So props to him for also writing a book. I don't have the patience.
Just as a quick question.
I just rant to people.
An aside, can you look at, do you have the thing, because you've been doing it long enough, where you can look at a typeface in sort of like a shop and just say that is such and such a typeface?
Yeah. So it is kind of a part.
Because I want to be able to do that, but I don't know how to get to a position where I know enough to be able to go, this is such and such and things like that.
That is a good question. I'm pulling out a book right now. So I almost forgot about this book. I bought this book. I'm holding my hand. You can't see it, but I'm holding this book in my...
Is it like black and white?
Yes, it is. Does it have a...
I have the same book.
Wait, is it
me,
the one with... Is this Rookledge's International Typefinder?
Give me 1 second. It might make loads of noise. No, I don't know. Hang on.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about my book, and then I want you to tell me about your book.
No, go for it.
So if we're speaking about... identifying typefaces and starting to begin to learn how to identify typefaces, I found this book on Amazon, and it's called Rookledge's International Typefinder, the Essential Handbook of Typeface Recognition and Selection. You have to look up that exact phrase. I've barely heard anyone talk about this book, but I found it. It literally has pages and pages of distinctive letters and just tells you interesting and unique things about them. And then you can use these indexes to find what font it is. It is kind of a weird, very niche thing. But my other secret tool is identifont.com, which, you know, I use that a lot when I can't remember something. But I mean, my assumption is my understanding is most graphic designers, like 90% of typography is around 300 typefaces. So do what I do and memorize every lowercase a of all of them. When you become passionate, it doesn't seem like work. It just feels like, oh yeah, this is this one. Or you just kind of remember something about it so you can find out more information and find it again. Like, oh, this feels like, I don't know, seems like a type of typeface that is by Chris Soursby at Klim or something. And I don't remember which high contrast serif this is, or what humanist kind of grotesque he's done or something like that. But I know to go to his website, and I know it's on that page somewhere, and then I can find it. Those are the earmarks. And, you know, I stole that from Eric Spiekerman, who just memorizes the lowercase a, lowercase g. And then sadly, if that letter isn't there, I'm kind of out of luck sometimes. But
I'm going to steal that from you.
It's absolutely free. What book do you have that is a black book?
This one is a different book. It is called The Field Guide to Typography, Typefaces in the Urban Landscape. And it's essentially the exact same as what you described. It's got a load of different typefaces in. I think they're categorized by sort of serif, sans serif, things like that. And it goes over sort of the distinctive parts of the letter forms. And it has a load of different examples of what they look like. I love the fact that we're both just sat describing books on an audio podcast.
This is so podcast.
But yeah, there's two for people that might want to do that, I guess. I've got that and it hasn't helped me. But I guess the A and it's got a lovely thing on the front as well. I don't know if you can, but you'd have to Google it. But it has like a pair of binoculars that's being made up of like letters, which looks really cool, just as an aside.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. I've seen this. I don't recall this book, but this looks like a well done book. I like there's an example of some typeface overlays, which is always very good. And also, I mean, I'm just looking at some photos of the interior. Like there, I also see that there's like a page of Frutiger. That's my understanding of how you pronounce it. But also they have like a very well-known example of it being, I believe that's Heathrow Airport. That is the yellow Heathrow Airport, or LaGuardia, as far as I can tell. That uses Frutiger because it was designed for an airport terminal. So very, very, very useful, because also I do think of typefaces as like, this was designed as a signage typeface. So I will, if I'm looking at a sign, there's a high likelihood, if it's a good typographer selecting things, that they used a signage focused typeface for it. So, I mean, right. I mean, because, you know, if you're looking at a sign, you're probably not going to see like a book typesetting font up there. Like it'd seem kind of out of place, unless you're in the back countries of England, and then it would seem very quaint and charming and perfect. but depending on the situation, you can the situation definitely always helps with identifying, because if you can tell what it was designed for. But when you get into display typography, it's like, oh, all these fonts are cool, and they're like they weren't really designed for something they're other than looking cool, and they're like, it's another one of those things. But all cool, all well done, all exciting, but like you're out of luck trying to find it.
That's fair. I just frantically gone through the book to look for the Frudiger page, and it's actually in Charles. Hang on, I've got to try and pronounce this. It's French. It's Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, not Heathrow. And it says that the distinguishing marks, because it has a little paragraph on them. It's got square dots over the I and the J, minimal stroke contrast, a large X height, and an uppercase R, possesses straight and curved tails. A little bit of fact fun there.
Those playing at home.
I'll just jump forward then. This has gone a lot longer than every other podcast I've done thus far, which is really nice.
Well, there you go. There you go. I bet your listeners are thirsting for more.
There's people that listen to this who know me that don't know anything about design, so I don't know how long they'll have gone on in the time podcast. So yeah, there's a couple of bits to this, and I guess I just wanted to ask yourself, personally, where do you think the future of design, well, the future of type is, I guess, and I mean that in a sense of, firstly, sort of variable fonts and things like that. Do you think that there's any tech out there that, people may not know that, because you work in type and things like that are maybe on the horizon maybe and things like that? Yeah,
well, the advantage of being in New York is it happens to be a kind of hotbed for, there's 3 really good cities for type design. I think that's The Hague in the Netherlands, or just the Netherlands, that whole country, Paris, London, and New York. So that's 4 places for but all of the it's interesting because I know there's a few of my friends, they are type designers, and they work at Google, and they Google Fonts has been investing a great deal into variable fonts, and as we know, Google Fonts has been taking over slightly, or maybe entirely, how people think about web typography as like almost a first choice sometimes. And I just saw a post on their Twitter account that there have been 1 trillion served to Google Fonts since, I guess they started serving fonts to websites, but 1 trillion served fonts, which is obscene, crazy to me, but also totally makes sense for a couple of reasons. Google Fonts has been investing heavily into variable font technology because, on one hand, they do want to serve fonts faster. And one component of a variable font is that, there are kind of 2 main pieces of information in a variable font, and as well as like kerning and stuff, but like there are 2 versions of a font that is just included inside of this font, and then on the fly the computer just kind of spits out a version between these 2 fonts based on whatever your browser kind of wants, or what the web designer kind of thinks you should see at a certain point. So that means you, instead of probably downloading a light, bold, medium, light italic, bold italic, medium italic, you download 4 fonts in 2 variable fonts in file size, essentially, because like the italic font is another design. But the file size has been like a significant boon just for people who are trying to work on bandwidth, and also delivering things to people with lower connection speeds, because it's very annoying if you're trying to see a well-made website and the slowest part is just like the font, because as we all know, type should be very transparent. It should be just there and serve language how the designer wants it to be. So the fun fact is that lots of people don't even realize that even if now there was a typeface that, like, let's say Oswald, which has been around on Google Fonts for as long as I can remember, I think as far as back as 2014 or something like that. a website designed in 2014 and asking Google fonts for Oswald Bold will no longer, it will make a request to the hosting server. And what the server will do now, instead of just deliver the font, like the single Oswald Bold font, it will deliver the whole variable font to the website and select the bold weight to be displayed. That is what Google is doing without people even asking for it to do, just because the bandwidth improvement is that significant. They decided to move their most used typefaces and convert them all into variable. And even old typefaces that didn't know web designers who didn't know or anticipate the variable fonts, they're getting a web font that is variable delivered to their site. And so that's completely invisible to the developer. It's invisible to us, but it's an effort Google's been making just to improve that bandwidth. And so that is some cool tech about variable fonts that not many people know, is that like lots of cases, many of us have been seeing variable fonts on our websites and we didn't even know. It was just that kind of a seamless transition but of course, tons of production was required. I've known lots of people who are helping and converting old typefaces to become variable. And that is no small task. It's almost like rebuilding the font from scratch and then making sure that it can dance for you. So like, lots of effort put in for that. And also, they're future proofing even more because there are new typefaces they're commissioning from foundries such as Production Type. Let me see here. Colophon. Lots of people like their typeface Aperçu. So Google Fonts commissioned new typefaces like DM Sans, DM Serif Display, DM Serif Text. Like these are typefaces that were designed by a really well-established type foundry and are now open source. Like, even you, Brian, can just take these fonts from Google Fonts and rip them open in glyphs and make your own font with them. You can't sell it, but like you can still do stuff on the bones of like a really established foundry. There's I could go on and on about this because also there's a typeface that maybe a lot of people used before called Archivo, and they just turned it into, I don't know the exact number of weights, but they made it before. It was just Archivo Black and Archivo Narrow. Those are the three families, and Archivo Black was just that weight. Now, I could look it up, but it's like 4 widths of typefaces from condensed to extended of Archivo and from light to black. And so all those widths, all those weights are now a variable font on Google, and nobody knows about that. And it's just like this giant family, super useful. Oh, and italics. It has italics too. So, an incredible improvement to like a pretty okay design that is now massively useful through all these widths, weights, italics, super functional, and it's variable. It's kind of crazy to me. And yeah, all that is for free for people to use. Google has been making a major investment into variable fonts, and I think it's going to have to change the type industry because there are a lot of type foundries that don't think of variable type as a worthwhile investment. So in response, Google is just hiring many type foundries to just do this work for them to continue and build massive families, because that is part of Google Fonts' mission now, to keep improving type design, and they have the budget to do so. So those are some exciting pieces to me about variable type. And you can also, like, if you can't download them easily from the download thing, there's usually a GitHub link where you can go and you can find that there's a lot more styles and optical sizes than they just show on googlefonts.com, because they only just show like, oh, light to bold, because like those really clean websites, like how are they going to fit all these widths and weights and optical sizes? So they're really robust ones, and you can find a lot more better information on the GitHub, which is on the Google Fonts, like that font page. at the bottom. There's like a tiny little link. So
yeah, I shall have a poke around at some point then soon. I guess as an aside to that as well, this is this kind of the second part of that question. But so I don't know if you know Atkinson Hyperlegible that was designed for the Braille Institute quite recently. But the Braille Institute rebranded because they found that whilst a lot of the people that they work with are completely, they don't have any sight in their eyes, they found that a lot of them do have a little bit of sight in their eyes, so a lot of them are kind of partially blind, things like that. So they wanted to rebrand to make, and kind of as a part of the rebrand, they wanted to change to a typeface which is as, accessible as possible. But the people that they work with, and I can't remember the people who they work with on the rebrand, but they found that when they were looking at typefaces, nothing was really hitting the sweet spot for them in terms of what they wanted it to do and things like that. So they decided to just make their own typeface essentially. And Atkinson Hyperlegible was the result of that. And if you look at it, because normally when you design a typeface, I believe when you do it, you'll take, say, if you create the N, like a lowercase n, you will take some of the DNA for that N. I know you can't do it like verbatim, you'd have to edit it and things like that, but you normally take some of the DNA from a lowercase n and you'd put that on maybe the R and the P, and then you'd flip the P to become the Q and things like that. But of course, as a result, because all of the letter forms have that DNA, sometimes I guess if you squinted and you imagine that you've kind of got poorer eyesight, they might blend into one another and things like that. So they wanted to try and diversify each letter form as much as possible. But they didn't want to do it because I suppose if you really wanted to do that, you could make each character a different style of type, couldn't you? You could have like the A is like a black letter typeface, and then B is sort of a sans serif, and then C is sort of a script, so they'd stand out from each other as much as possible. But they didn't want to do things in that kind of style. They wanted it to look quite modern still. And if you do look at it, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's still it's a nice sans serif type of thing. And where was I going with this? So off of the back of that, people were talking about online about how it's kind of opened up another sort of set of fonts, so to speak. So you'd have sort of, your sans serif, your serif, things like that. And then they'd have a hyperlegible section for maybe sort of, hospitals and things like that. So I guess I wanted to ask on the back of that, with sort of design advocacy becoming more of a thing in terms of people doing work for good, can you see kind of, I guess, people doing a lot more, people making type, which sometimes is focused a lot more on legibility as a whole than style, so to speak? So
the thing to me about the Atkinson Hyperlegible typeface, and so I believe this work was done by Applied, which is, I believe they're more known for strategy.
Yeah, I think I went to a lecture by them on the typeface is what all this comes from, and I think they said in it they hadn't done a typeface before. It was their first thing that they did in sort of this realm, so to speak. Right. So as someone who's trained themselves a lot to kind of understand I'll start from this angle. So a lot of the theories and kind of questions they were asking while designing this typeface were good ones. So like there are a lot of differentiated letter forms, and I'm on their site right now, and they, for the Braille Institute, about why their typeface is, a worthwhile kind of usage of you, and perhaps to use for other things. And so they're speaking about things about like, how does the letter 1 kind of differentiate from the capital I, from the lowercase I, from the L? How are these forms as different as possible? They're talking about double curved kind of shapes, which can often feel similar with low vision environments, such as, or like lowly sighted people, like the B and the 8. They worked very hard to make sure that those things. Yeah, like the bottom of the 8 is like really blown out. If you look at it, it's really wider than the top of the 8 and things like that. Right, exactly. So people who are not of the highest acuity, they can find the most like useful differentiation. So a lot of these theories and a lot of these kind of problems they're trying to solve, they're good. They are advocating for well done and inclusive design approaches. However, do you know another typeface that differentiates very well between the letter 1, the letter I, the capital I, the lowercase L? Verdana. It's also on every computer
was designed with those sort of specifications to be highly legible at a low point at a small size, which also means it has to look very compelling and different, very blurry. So when Matthew Carter was working on this typeface for Microsoft, being one of the first few serifs for, like, I'm not even sure, but like I'm believing Windows 95 or something like that, like all the way back then, he was thinking of these things in mind. He was also thinking about having characters that were very distinct from one another in terms of like having the 9 being very distinct from other kind of double bold shapes. A lot of these shapes are very similar to Verdana, aside from perhaps the tail and the Q, which is a good move to have additional differentiation from a single story A and a Q. But a lot of the applications of this, it isn't as good as many typefaces that were made by a trained professional. So I can tell this is their first typeface. I understand the theories that they were trying to apply. But the issue with this for me, and also like the dyslexia font, for example, which they were designed with, dyslexia in mind. I have dyslexia and I'm a type designer. This dyslexia typeface is terrible. There's tons of research, and there's other typefaces that try to accomplish the same things, and they're done by type designers, and they don't have the same marketing or notoriety because they don't have a PR marketing team telling people about it. But dyslexia, this dyslexia font is now on every Kindle, and you'll have a terrible time looking at it. But I do understand and appreciate cause-based branding, trying to make tools to equalize the world. But I also think that there are skilled professionals who, when they go to school, and when I went and had when I was at Type at Cooper for 1 month, this is one of the first things we were talking about like, ways to differentiate these things. They're not mind-blowing new concepts that they're executing here. They're actually quite fundamental to whatever every type designer is trying to do. So I don't find this groundbreaking. I don't find this well made. And but if Applied really want to make their own font and put it in the clothing of, oh, it's very accessible, I get that. But it's the same sort of, to me, like the snake oil of what a good design is, or like why a design is worth money. Like, that's something else. So that is my personal take. And I am not saying that this is like a wholly clout chasing typeface or a useless typeface. I do think that it is a very legible typeface, but I do also think that there are very better crafted typefaces that do similar things, because there are parts of this craftsmanship, like the lowercase s seems like it's falling over backwards. The bottom of the lowercase a is far too big, and maybe they were trying to compensate in a certain way to do that. But in reading text, if you see that letter A over and over, it's going to make you feel like your eye is falling to the side or something. It will be distracting just because there are tons of small systems that people are trained to intertwine really well with one another that this isn't accomplishing on that fundamental level. However, all these theories that they set out to do were good things to do to be legible. But, if you really want accessibility, like Verdana's on every computer. So if you really want a really legible typeface, use Verdana. But it doesn't look as cool for sure. It's not a geometric. It doesn't have round dots. It looks like, it was designed to look great coming off of a laser printer from the 90s, because it was, but it has all the same design features. But if people are tired of it, people are tired of it.
But do you think there's a market in terms of, sacrificing maybe stylistic things? And I know you said that it is a thing that already does kind of exist, but in terms of just completely sacrificing style in terms of legibility, do you think that's a thing that could become more of a thing, or maybe already is a thing? Maybe.
I mean, it is.
Is there a line in terms of, like you mentioned, the A being really open? I guess when you look at it, there are things where you'd expect, but I guess fundamentally, does opening up an A make it more readable?
I mean, yeah. However, the top of it.
I don't have it in front of me. I should have it in front of me, really.
Yeah. It's just more of craft-based components to me that stands out as if it was their first yeehaw in type design, which it was. And I feel like they, what I'm overall saying is that there's another typeface that's called Lexend, which is, I'm not paid by Google or anything, but it's a Google font and it's free. And it was designed of a similar sort of thing about like, how do we improve legibility for reading for children? And what they found was instead of trying very hard to make lots of different individual changes between all the letters, they just made different font styles that were more tracked out from one another. So if a child was struggling more with reading and legibility, all they had to do, it was switch to this more wide typeface. And suddenly there's so much more space around all the letters. And that is wholly sacrificing style for this actual approach of legibility. So, yeah. So, I mean, this is a more stylish thing and less, I say, well-crafted typeface, but there are lots of typefaces that do this sort of thing, have a little bit better craft, but, you know, don't have like, I do know that if they wanted to create all these changes, they did have to make a new typeface from scratch, and that's difficult. And they were probably looking for a way to, you know, have something distinctive, have these sort of bold qualities. Like, I do like the fact that the I dot is a little bit higher than the caps for when you look at Atkinson in Atkinson bold. I think that's kind of charming. It's fun. It feels fresh. Because lots of type designers think like, oh, I got to have like, or they'll think that the client will really want the I really low, but like, actually this corresponds with the Braille Institute like icon. So it's kind of a distinguishing feature. And on the other hand, like if the I dot's very high, you can tell the word shape far better because overall, you know, it has more distinction. But so, I mean, you can take it from two different ways. You can like really hone in on the very legible differentiations or finding a new theory about like, if someone's having a difficult time reading something, make their font size bigger. That's why, you know, I used to work at a Bible publisher, and, you know, we had large print Bibles because people couldn't read. So we didn't, you know, create a new fancy typeface. We just made the font bigger. And that's why children's books, because they're trying to figure out letter forms for the first time, they're very simplified letter forms, but they're big. And so when you don't have as much flexibility in terms of like font size, you can also track it out so that the space around the letters is more distinguishable. So I do think in the future, like in terms of like display typefaces that are not trying to service people of low vision, but, you know, kind of about like editorial design and like, how do I make a website look really interesting, or how do I make a magazine layout quite compelling? There are many, you know, lots of people are breaking a lot of these rules just to be very stylish. So I'm not saying that this whole project was like a waste of effort or something. I'm just saying that if they worked more closely with an experienced typeface designer, they might have found a little bit more success.
Well, I've been asking people at the end, because I haven't been doing this a long time. I've only done a few of them, but I normally ask people, and again, I might be springing this on you. It might be something you have stored up, but instead of asking you about I normally ask people if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself a piece of advice, but it's a bit of a crap question anyway. It's a bit cliche. So instead, if you had to pick 5 typefaces? Okay, this is a little bit cliche in itself, but if you had to pick 5,
oh boy, making me
and they can't be ones you've made as well. How about that?
Well, it's a very small list of fonts that I've made, so that's fine. I've only made around 30 typefaces. But anyway, keep going. So just 5 typefaces that I like.
I want like 5. If you had to pick, if every typeface was going to die ever, and you had to pick 5,
every typeface going to die. Oh, okay. Well, I know one of them that's one of my favorites. I speak about it all the time, and we didn't even get into how much I dislike monotype. But Rich, that could be
I'd love to have you on again at some point so we can do this again anytime.
That'd be a whole nother podcast of just like hating monotype, but all the goss I got. Great people, but it's publicly owned. It's kind of gross sometimes. But anyway, a top one for me is Neue Haas Grotesque, and so I think you might have heard me speak about this typeface before, but it is a.
Did you talk about it on your the thing with the future?
Yes,
it rings a bell that you did.
Correct. I did bring it up. I will never not name drop Neue Haas Grotesque, which is a revival of Helvetica, and it is of a select amount of sizes. Like it has text versions of Helvetica, and I believe 18 styles of display Helvetica. And I always think it sets wonderfully. It does exactly what you want. It feels like how Helvetica should feel. And I'm kind of sad that most people don't realize how good Helvetica can look like because they're stuck with looking at something that was based off of photo typositors, like whatever, like all these conversion things to digital that Monotype put out, and it looks kind of boring and sad. And then Neue Haas Grotesque fixes a ton of those problems that weren't there how they originally drew it in the 1950s. So I'm quite fond of that type family. So kind of sad that I have talked to Christian Schwartz. He is never going to release any condensed weights of it. He is not expanding that family whatsoever. He is tired of how boring that typeface looks to him. So sad for me. So that is a type family that I'm quite fond of. A serif that's like a tried and true for me is this is a very nerdy kind of selection for me, at least. It's Kepler, and it was designed by Robert Slimbach for Adobe, and it is a 4 optical size typeface with I believe 4 or 5 widths and tons of weights. It was designed for newspaper typesetting, and it has over 100. It has 168 weights. It is a juggernaut of a typeface, and I use the hell out of it for typesetting a newspaper. And when you redesign a newspaper from scratch, or when you're typesetting on a newspaper for a year with it, like you start to know really how to use it. So that has a very soft spot for me. Let me see here. I'm actually just kind of scrolling.
I can cut it to 3 if you want to do 3 instead.
3. I mean, I guess I'll also throw in LL Circular by Linetto. I remember when I first saw it in 2013, I saw a sample and I was like, oh my God, I love this typeface. And people playing at home don't know LL Circular. It is the typeface that Spotify now uses everywhere. And like every like out of home, like millennial focused, like pharmaceutical ads to like, it's just everywhere. It's like this wonderful combination between Futura and Helvetica, and I can't get enough of it. But I don't have cool enough projects to misuse it. I guess I'll also say Druck, which is another commercial type family. It was designed to be kind of like a very design carrying component paired with Neue Haas Grotesque. It's basically all these really condensed, squished, exaggerated, mechanical, grotesque styles that are, it's like it taught so many graphic designers that you can use a really narrow font for the first time, which is kind of cool. So the styles are just obscenely narrow, and Burton Hasby did a wonderful job in that type family. And, I've used it a couple times in projects. I think I'm going to have to stop there. I can't think of any more, but obviously I'm very sans serif heavy. You know what? Okay, fine. I'll do one more. I guess I'll say IBM Plex Sans. That was done by Bold Monday for IBM. It is also on Google Fonts. But I think it has a wonderful neutrality to it, but also it does feel like a DIN that is for text, and also has a nice flavorfulness to it. Like it's very difficult to just kind of describe typefaces, but those playing at home, Neue Haas Grotesque, Kepler Standard, LL Circular by Linetto, Druck by Commercial Type, and IBM Plex by Bold Monday for IBM. So those are probably my top 5.
One last thing, and I know we've been here for an hour now, so if you just want to say no and bounce, that's fine. And I might use
well,
this
I can't
as
say
kind
that now, can I, Brian?
No, that's fine. I'm not keeping you.
No, I'm down. I'm clearly down. I just like wagging my jaw.
This will be the last one, though. But,
okay, absolutely.
But when you designed the BF Tinyhand typeface, can you explain that? Can you go over that a little bit for people that are listening?
Yeah, no. So I do want to quickly jump into saying that it was a very different time, 2016. Because working on a Donald Trump associated typeface now feels kind of unconscionable. But back in 2016, when I was at BuzzFeed and everyone thought he was going to lose the election terribly to a probably very qualified politician, we all thought we were having a good fun. But I was a contractor working at BuzzFeed at the time. And so I was mostly there just as a lettering artist. And also I was working on key art for news articles. So I wasn't at... I think it's important to note that I wasn't necessarily at BuzzFeed. I wasn't making listicles about things, or I did make a GIF, but it was mostly about me helping and supporting news reporters and writers of kind of culture pieces. So they were slightly more angled towards long form content versus listicles or like quizzes or something. So when I was at BuzzFeed, I was like mostly watching news kind of pieces go through the docket. And also we were leading up to the election in 2016 in America, for your friends who are not American. I think it was around 10 in the morning and I showed up around 5 minutes late. And my art director, the deputy art director, Ben King, asked me, is like, hey, how quickly can you make a typeface? Which that's probably like a bad question to get, but I says like, it depends. I mean, it might only take me 1 or 2 days. Like, what is it? And it's like, and he was like, well, it's some handwriting. I'm like, okay, well, that's a little bit more of a lift, or actually easier in certain ways. And I'm like, whose is it? And he's like, I want you to make Donald Trump's handwriting for this piece that someone's doing as like a parody of Donald Trump's notes for the second debate, because he kept on like looking down at his notes and making notes when Hillary Clinton was making rebuttals to his comments or something like that. So it's like, okay, let's go. And so there's lots of kind of press clippings. Oh, and he already knew at that point, by the way, that it's like, oh, and the name has to be Tinyhand, because all these handwriting typefaces are, they're mostly like Eric hand or left hand or, caddish hand. And so it's like, well, we all know that Donald Trump has tiny hands, so this is Tinyhand. Right. So we already knew the name. We already were very excited about how fun this is going to be. But I had 2 days of work ahead of me of finding as many like writing samples as I possibly could, scanning them, making like little screenshots of every letter, putting them into like little pieces, because I was hand tracing every single letter, mostly from 3 primary sources, because, Donald Trump liked to print out news articles or something like that and then scribble on it in Sharpie and then mail that fax that copy that he annotated, passionately to the reporter or the paper or the magazine or whatever. So there was actually a few examples that are pretty easy to find. So the process was pretty. I mean, if you look at the typeface, and I did do this. Can you tell me off the top of your head how long ago 2016 was in years? Because I'll have to ask Google, but I might as well ask you, Brian. 2016, 5 years ago. We'll go with that. Let's go with 5 years ago. 5 years ago, right? We're designers. We're not counters. But so. Let me see here. Where was I even going? But if you look at...
Why did I say 4? I'm so stupid. Sorry, go on.
I mean, 2020 didn't count. So, that's why we're counting 4.
Yeah, that's very true.
So anyway, the most kind of notable component of the development is I made a lot of different alternate characters. Like there's some wider characters because sometimes if he's the beginning of a word, he gets a lot more excited. So he makes this really huge U or something, or a really big S. There's he just goes really big, and then he has all these scrunched letters. So I made lots of different versions of those letters. I made some things. If you type an exclamation point 3 times in a row, that makes different ones next to one another. Lots his signatures is in there. I hand digitized his signature for some dumb reason. Just because I thought people would really want to put his signature somewhere in a document. And let me see. Oh, right. I also had to make up all the numerals, which is why they look the least kind of like the rest of the typeface. I literally took out a Sharpie, turned my hand to the side, and tried drawing all the numerals from scratch. So, yeah, that was kind of the development. And it really did blow up on Twitter, and that was fun. And my phone was literally buzzing like crazy. So that was cool. And then he lost, and then he won the election. Which, yeah, he won. Well, he's gone now, I think.
Yeah.
I think. No, but it was funny while he was during the election, it got picked up again because there was a news reporter who took a photograph. I think that I don't remember the photographer is Mark Ryson or something like that, took a photograph over his shoulder of his notes, and he was just I did not quid pro quo or something like that. It was about the Russia probe or some shit. And people were very tickled by what his handwriting looked like on that. An actual sitting president's handwriting looked like. So people refound out the typeface, and also JKR Global tried to make a better typeface than mine in one day, and it looked like shit. And I will say that about JKR if they ever talk to me.
That's not very nice.
You have to look at it.
No, I mean the fact that they tried to make it, that's not very
right.
nice.
And I also looked through the design notes, and they found one.
Do you know what it's called? Just out of curiosity, so I can have a look while we're talking.
It's just JKR Donald Trump.
Face?
Yeah.
Quip pro sans.
Yes, they did. That's it. Quid pro sans. And so I remember their document, the person who made the typeface very quickly, his documentation had a screenshot of one of the samples of mine, and I didn't make an X yet in the sample they were looking at. So my art director scribbled in an X because I didn't know they would need an X in this long piece. So they used that example of my art director trying to make up an X as an example of why they needed a new typeface, which is clearly they just didn't even look at my font. Or maybe they didn't want to bother. It's hey, do you mind if we, a multi-million-dollar international agency, use your typeface without paying you for anything? So maybe they just wanted to have more control of the rights or something like that. So
there's letter forms there's letter forms in here that are the exact same as yours, isn't there as well?
Right.
The J is just your J and things like that.
I'm looking it up again. Damn,
that's crazy.
I'm still trying to find it. Oh, right. So if you're looking at the It's Nice, that article, they have the example of my font there. And quid pro sans. I guess they did get that J right. So I didn't know they had multiple forms, but a lot of the ways that they came together is just a little bit messier. And especially how you use it in the site. Oh, the spacing is really bad. That doesn't help at all. So like Genius Note or something like that. It's complete. I'm
looking at the exact same thing at the exact same time, and it is that I'd end up in that Facebook group that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. So that was annoying to me. I did tweet at them about it and they didn't reply. But in the end, Jimmy Fallon did do a bit about the font. So I don't know how many typefaces have had jokes about them on The Tonight Show, but I know mine was one of them. So proud of that.
You won in the end.
I did. I did win in the end. JKR, try to.
Do you know if? Just as an aside, do you know if he's seen it, or would you know that
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Probably. My mom was honest.
Did you watch the Tonight Show?
What?
Do you think he watches the Tonight Show?
I don't.
Do you think he would have seen it when it's on that? Maybe.
I mean, someone told me I don't even watch the Tonight Show. I only found out because someone said, "Hey, Mark, did you know your font's on the Tonight Show?" So, did not know, but he has to know about it. I mean, it's been around for 4 years. I mean, also, unfortunately, some of his supporters use it as like a badge of pride because they're fans of what he does. So, like, not a fan of that. It's not the best. Not the best. So, I mean, if anything, he's probably seen it in that sense. And also, and also the Stephen Colbert used it when Donald Trump was leaving office. Like they made a fake note about that they said that Donald Trump left a note to President Biden and like left it in his desk or put it on his desk, like it's customary for the president to leave a note for the next president or something like that. So apparently, the Stephen Colbert's Tonight Show also did a little gag and they used my typeface for that parting note. So that was fun too. I know that ex-President Trump has seen my typeface, although my mother was worried that he would try to sue me because of course everyone knows that Donald Trump tries to sue people at, varying degrees of success. So and I was like, the BuzzFeed lawyers will cover me. They better. I mean, I was on their clock for this project. I was literally on their premises for that. So
that's fantastic.
I know. She was so worried.
That's pretty much it then. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, like my life has peaked after that. I'm not sure what else I could even tell you about, if I'm honest, man. Well, anyway, yeah. So it's a really fun project to be a part of. So, hopefully my next project, that's typographic, can be a little bit less clickbaity, a little bit more about helping the world, less about adding to the notoriety, less about the notoriety about some person I didn't even agree with and that I didn't think was going to sit in office. So that's probably, but fortunately, I mean, the thing with freelancing, I'm not sure if you freelance with graphic design and stuff, but it's very strange and unpredictable, at least for me, like when people just decide that they need your help. So like this past week has been a very busy week, which is kind of fun. So been working on like designing some scripts for like a wine label. So that's cool. So, who knows? Maybe I'll just have my stuff all over wine bottles. I could think of worse things for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. And then for the people that are listening as well, Mark has got other fonts that are lovely that he's worked on as well. It's not just the Donald Trump typeface. It's just there is other ones in here that I'm just looking now.
Well, thank you so much. My other ones are behind embargo for good and bad reason. It's all about what the client needs though. So that's kind of cool. But just being a problem solver. So anyway, this has been really fun, and I really appreciate you having me on. No
problem. My pleasure.
Wonderful podcast host. 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
Would recommend.
Just reading books and all different stuff. Yeah, that's fine then. Do you want to plug all of your socials and where people can find you online and things like that? Just to finish things off.
I mean, I absolutely can. If they stuck around for, we've been recording for a bit over an hour at this point, but you're probably going to cut it down. But if people want to find me on Instagram, I have 2 Instagrams. I have my personal Instagram account, which is Marky C Davis. And I also have my font design Twitter account, which is Mark Fonts. You can find me on Twitter at Mark Fonts. And my website, where you can reach out to me about any questions about designing typefaces, or just want to chat about, like, you know, your favorite version of universe or something like that, or how I should say univers and not universe. If you want to get pedantic, I can handle it. My website is designermarkdavis.com. And, you know, you can find me there. I'm there all the time. I'm always there.
Hello, it's me again. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you've gotten through all of this, I applaud you. If you are somebody that's interested in type, I'd recommend dropping him a follow online, maybe dropping him a message. He makes some beautiful typefaces. If you want to follow me online, I am at Pirated Material on Instagram. That is PIRATEDMATERIAL. Pirated Material. My website is piratedmaterial.co.uk. I'm on TikTok at Pirated Material too, posting daily, hopefully. So drop me a follow. Also drop me a review on Apple Podcasts and things like that. It helps the algorithm and gets us up the charts, hopefully, which would be nice. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. George, play the tape cassette thingamajig where it comes out. He's not really dead.